Last time on Darkcore Frontiers. The heist on the Aegis Transport takes a perilous turn as Nex returns to the Nebula Nighthawk. When the security codes unexpectedly change, Ironclaw's team faces a treacherous journey through a breach in the ship's hull. Meanwhile, tensions rise on the bridge as Captain Grimhelm grows suspicious of Rax Jarex's true identity. With time running out and the Darkcore shards within reach, Nex must find a way to stop the heist before it's too late. Darkcore Frontiers, Season 1, The Stowaway, by Thomas Chase. Episode 12, The Nighthawk's Flight.
Captain, we're detecting a number of ships dropping out of hyperspace.
A fleet of vessels, led by the flagship Patriot, flashed around Admiral Susek's warship. The sudden appearance of heavily armed vessels sent a shockwave through the bridge of the Nebula Nighthawk. Around the Patriot, a dozen Venus-class cruisers adjusted their vectors, creating a complex attack formation. Their distinctive L-shaped silhouettes were lined with point defense lasers and turrets. Hangar bays in their ventral sections deployed swarms of Raptor superiority fighters. On the perimeter, Phantom destroyers ghosted in and out of the Nighthawk's sensors. Captain Grimhelm's skeletal fingers tightened on his command chair as a sector-wide channel opened. A grizzled visage filled the view screen.
This is Admiral Fox of the Space Authority. You are hereby ordered to stand down and prepare to be boarded.
Grimhelm's eye sockets flared. He cut the communication and swiveled to face his crew.
Slime, establish an encrypted channel to Captain Duloc on the Innovation. Now.
Slime's fingers tapped the console. Captain Duloc's weathered face appeared on the view screen.
Duloc, evacuate your teams. Prepare for emergency undarking procedures.
Duloc's eyes narrowed.
Are you mad, Captain Grimhelm? We're so close to the...
We're sitting targets here. The Space Authority fleet has us surrounded. We have minutes, maybe seconds before they board.
And the shards? We can't just
We're
leave.
coming around to the hull breach to pick them up. Get your people out now, or I'll leave you behind. Understood?
A tense moment passed. Finally, Duloc nodded.
Understood. Innovation out.
As the screen went dark, Nex's attention was drawn to the helmet cam feeds inside the Aegis Transport. Ironclaw, Spank, and Tiny stood before the vault doors. They were made of some kind of blue refractive alloy, etched with strange surface patterns. Ironclaw's cybernetic hand hovered over the handle. He hesitated for a second before pressing against it. The interlocking mechanisms of the vault disengaged. The door slowly moved outward and divided. Inside the vault, 7 cases marked with radiation hazard symbols were arranged in a semicircle, each one blinking with red warning LEDs. Through armored viewing ports, the Darkcore shards pulsated with a strange energy. Nex felt a jolt of recognition, memories of the Darkcore gem in their home on Zraynian. But there was something different, something angry in the pulsing of these shards that Nex could feel. Ironclaw let out a low whistle.
Beautiful slag rats, ain't they?
Spank nodded, transfixed.
Like staring into the heart of a black hole.
The 3 donned specialized protective gloves and disengaged the case's locks. The lids swung open. Dark energy concentrations reflected off the sides of the vault like ripples in a pool of ink. Ironclaw's metal arm gently grasped one of the shards. As he lifted it from its case and transferred it to the shielded containment unit, the energy field around it intensified. Outside, the Null Taurus quaked as a salvo of guided missiles from the vectoring Raptors found their mark. The frigate's shields flared. As it diverted power to reinforce its defenses, the Null Taurus's tractor beam released the corvettes from their deadlock around the Aegis Transport.
Personnel aboard, airlock sealed. Initiating undocking sequence.
The Nighthawk quivered as it released from the docking clamps. Nex fingered the EMP in his pocket. In theory, it would cripple the Nighthawk, but he had no idea what strength the EMP had, or if it would do anything to the ship's controls at all. It might also fry DC, And who knew what might happen if the Darkcore shards were within range? He wouldn't use it unless he had no other choice.
Navigation? Plot a vector around the Aegis Transport. Use the Null Taurus for cover.
On the Aegis Transport, a new complication arose. From the ship's bridge security feed, dazed members of the crew started to stir. The paralytic gas was wearing off. The captain of the transport pulled himself into his command chair. He squinted against the light of the emergency beacons. Static spit through the speakers as he fumbled with the comm controls.
Security. This is Captain Cross. We've been attacked.
He swayed in his chair.
Reactivate security protocol.
Captain Grimhelm stood and paced the bridge of the Nebula Nighthawk.
Navigation. Position us relative to the Aegis Transport's hull breach.
He turned to his communications officer.
Signal Admiral Susek.
Susek's face appeared on the monitor.
What is happening over there, Grimhelm? Have you acquired the shards yet?
Grimhelm's jaw clenched.
My team is inside the vault now.
He replied,
I want every rust bucket and flying scrap heap you've got running interference.
Susek's eyes narrowed.
Very well, Grimhelm. However, I must insist that you stop wasting time and secure those shards immediately.
It was pretty clear he meant business. Grimhelm took a seat in his chair. The breached section of the Aegis Transport's hull was now visible on their long-range sensors. Even cloaked, occasional high-energy particles peppered the Nighthawk's hull. Helmsman Shears adjusted their approach vector.
Ironclaw.
Grimhelm barked into the comm.
What's your status?
Inside the Aegis Transport, Ironclaw and his team were sealing up the shielded containment units when alarms inside the vault began to squawk and warning lights flashed. As they activated the container's repulsion field emitters and began pushing them out, the vault doors started to slide shut. With the strength of his metal arm, Ironclaw wedged them open. Hydraulics whined in protest.
Hey, Spank, get a move on, will ya?
He growled through gritted teeth. Spank darted through the narrowing gap, pushing the last containment unit. The doors slammed shut behind him with a thud. Ironclaw tapped his comm unit.
We got what we came for, Captain, but we got company.
His words cut short as a pair of shiny black Omega-class security droids strode around the corner.
Contact front!
The pirates dropped into a triangular formation around the hovering cargo containers. Spank and Tiny dove for cover behind corners. Ironclaw crouched behind one of the containment units. The droids crouched, arms out and eyes flashing red. Their weaponized arms lit up, firing a volley of rifts. Perfectly circular holes appeared in the walls around the pirates. Spank unfastened some kind of modified weapon from his back. With a series of clicks and whistles, he folded it out. Its display lit up as the AI targeting system engaged, analyzing the droid's phase disruption armor. He fired. A droid's arm vanished into a momentary void, and the rift closed with a snap of displaced air. The droid's frame began to shift. A panel on its right shoulder slid open, and a secondary arm unfolded out of it like some metallic origami. At its end, a cylindrical apparatus swiveled into place. A wrist-mounted rocket launcher. Ironclaw flattened out as a rapid succession of vortex rockets spun through the corridor. The vortexes expanded out rapidly, folding in one of the shard containers before snapping shut. Tiny lumbered forward, snatching a magnetized sticky bomb from his tactical belt.
Grenade out!
He bellowed, tossing it towards the droids. The lead unit's ocular sensors flashed, analyzing the incoming threat. A high-pitched whine cut through the air as a blue dome wrapped around the droids. The sticky bomb struck the shield and fizzled.
Son of a Bloxorian slime beast!
Tiny cursed as the droid advanced. Suddenly, 3 more droids dropped from concealed wall compartments, their articulated limbs moving with crazy speed. Spank laid down a barrage, his weapon popping as it opened microportals around and behind the droids. Chunks of metal disappeared from their frames as the rifts closed. A sudden tear ripped through space near the hull. A hiss of escaping air filled the corridor.
Watch your fire.
Ironclaw shouted over the ruckus.
To the shuttle, go!
The team began their strategic withdrawal. Spank and Tiny alternated suppressing fire as they leapfrogged backwards through the smoke-filled corridor. Ironclaw guided the containment units. The air crackled with opening and closing rifts. The remaining machines strode forward, their AI constantly calculating new attack vectors. The pirates slammed against the sealed containment door and tethered themselves to safety lines.
Brace for decompression.
His metal fingers tapped the door's control panel.
Blowing the hatch in 3, 2, 1.
With a squeal of hydraulics, the door opened. The pursuing security droids were sucked out. Their red optics faded as they tumbled away, becoming glinting specks against the star-studded backdrop of space. Now in zero gravity, Ironclaw pushed off from the door, gliding towards the waiting shuttle. The containment units floated, secured to tethers alongside him. Nex watched as the team loaded the containers into the shuttle's small cargo bay. If those shards made it to the Nighthawk, he might lose his only shot.
Slime, take over the bridge. I'm going down to the docking bay to personally see to it that those shards make it safely aboard the ship.
Yes, Captain.
Slime said, taking his place in the captain's chair. Nex watched in horror as the service shuttle approached the Nighthawk. A jolt from a nearby explosion shook the vessel. Panicked voices spluttered over the channel.
Captain, we're off course.
The ship's grappling arms activated.
Hold steady. I'm bringing you in.
Captain Grimhelm's voice cracked. The massive robotic appendages extended, grabbing onto the shuttle and pulling it aboard.
We're clear.
Captain Grimhelm's voice boomed over the comms. Nex was out of time. With trembling hands, he pulled the EMP device from his pocket. His finger hovered over the activation switch. Captain Grimhelm was securing the shards. Slime was preparing to make the jump into hyperspace. Nobody was paying attention to Nex.
Engage jump drive.
Captain Grimhelm yelled through the comms. With a deep breath, Nex leapt forward. Pushing the EMP hard against the command console, he hit the button. A wave of invisible energy slammed outward. The effect was immediate. Consoles across the bridge sparked and went dark. The view screens died. Red emergency lighting kicked in. DC, hovering nearby, let out a pitiful squeak as his systems overloaded. The little bot dropped to the floor, lights fading.
DC!
Nex cried out, reaching for him. But before he could take a step, rough hands seized him. Two of Grimhelm's goons pinned his arms behind his back, wrenching the EMP device from his grasp.
You idiot!
Slime snarled.
What have you done? I told the captain he was a fool. They trust you.
We've lost all controls on the bridge.
Slime turned to the engineer.
Switch to auxiliary power and reboot everything.
The door pulled open. There stood Grimhelm. His skeletal form seemed to grow larger as he towered over Nex, his eye sockets blazing.
I should have divined thy true nature.
He said.
A gutter slug, a saboteur, perhaps even a Space Authority spy.
As if in answer, a violent shiver ran through the ship. Klaxons blared across the bridge. Nex's blood turned to ice as Helmsman Shears called out,
"We have power back up on the main console."
What's going on out there?
Hull breach on deck 4.
Slime called out, his bulbous eyes wide.
We're venting atmosphere, Captain.
Grimhelm whirled away from Nex.
Seal it off! Reroute power to the emergency force fields.
But even as the crew scrambled to obey, another tremor rocked the ship. This time it was accompanied by a deep, resonant boom that seemed to come from everywhere at once.
What was that?
Slime tapped his console, calling up damage reports and sensor readings.
Oh my, Captain. It's down in the docking bay. The Darkcore shards. I don't know what's happening, but they're sending out huge power anomalies. They're reacting to one another, creating some kind of cascading energy effect.
Suddenly, all the memories from Zraynian came flooding back to Nex. This was way too much like what happened on his planet right before it all went down. Captain Grimhelm stood for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was cold.
You think we're licked because a pack of Authority hounds are snapping at our heels? Well, think again.
Grimhelm strode to his command chair.
Slime, status on the hyperdrive.
The Luminid scientist blinked, his watery eyes fixed on his readings.
It's operational, Captain, but barely. If we attempt to jump, there's no telling where we might end up.
Grimhelm laughed, a harsh, metallic sound.
Where we end up matters not a whit.
The ship shuddered again. Through the viewport, Nex could see the Space Authority fleet closing in. Grimhelm's skeletal hands gripped the edges of the control panel.
Initiate jump sequence.
The Nebula Nighthawk groaned as its damaged systems struggled to comply. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and the deck plates vibrated. Nex felt a surge building inside him. With a burst of strength, he wrenched free from his captors. He lunged for the control panel, not entirely sure what he was going to do, just that he had to do something. But he was too late. Captain Grimhelm's bony finger descended on the activation switch. The hyperdrive engaged with a sound like the air itself being torn apart. Stars outside the viewport stretched into lines of brilliant light. The Nebula Nighthawk shook. For a moment, the ship hung on the edge of normal space, caught between dimensions. Then, with a final wrenching lurch, they were pulled into hyperspace. You've been listening to Darkcore Frontiers. If you enjoyed the story, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Wondrous Legends. And if you like this production, you can help us make Season 2 by supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/wondrouslegends. Thank you for listening.